of mine, well, it's teaching me so many things, like how to love and how to lose and how to choose.
Well, hello, this is Linda Carbonell, and welcome to another edition of Walking to Life. Today I have with me Senator Dave Zuckerman. Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did just fine.
And you're running for lieutenant governor this year.
That's right.
Yeah. So I just want to skip into what I saw this morning on the news about the progressive Democrat and what you're not entitled to do. You want to talk a little bit about that, what's happening there?
Well, sure. I'll give a little background first, which is that I've served in the House for 14 years. I've served in the Senate for 4 years. And in my 4 years serving in the Senate, I've always run in the Democratic primary. I've also won the write-in of the Progressive Party, and I've run as a progressive/Democrat. And in my time in the Senate, I've worked well with everybody. I've earned the support of the Majority Leader, Democratic Majority Leader Philip Baruth, as well as Windsor County Senator Dick McCormick, Senator from Madison County, from Washington County, Anthony Polina, and former Governor Phil Hoff, the first Democrat elected governor in Vermont. And when I announced my campaign, I reached out to the Democratic Party to ask for access, or how to go about getting access to the list that they have, which really indicates who are likely primary voters, so that each campaign can focus their resources on the people that are likely to vote. And granted, I'm reaching out to a broader swath of people, but the people that are likely to vote, you want to make sure they know about you, and you want to make sure they're familiar with you when they go to vote and have as much information about all the candidates as possible. And the Democratic Executive Committee decided not to give me access. And so on the one hand, while they always want folks who are challenging the establishment of politics and the two-party system to run within the two-party system so that there aren't three-way races, they've now said, well, we want you to run in our party, but we're not going to give you a level playing field. And so for about the last 5 or 6 months, I've been quietly talking with them to try to get them to change their view on that, to grant me equal access to the ability to reach out to voters in every town that I go to that are likely Democratic primary voters. And they really haven't really budged much in allowing for that. And now there's only 5 weeks left. And while I was hoping that they would remedy the situation without it becoming a big public issue, it's now sort of risen to that, because last Saturday, the state committee of the Democratic Party said, yes, David gets to be a Democrat. We're endorsing him as much as we are the other two candidates in the race. And someone at the meeting said, so does this mean he gets access to the database so that it's a level playing field? And the director said, no. We're going to talk about it later, but no for now.
Yeah, something like 2 weeks or something?
So, maybe in a couple weeks, but at that point, there's only 3 weeks left. So
Exactly.
when my opponent has had the list for 6 months, every time you go to a town, you do mailings to the people in that town, say, oh, I'm coming over to Woodstock, I'm coming over to White River Junction, mail a mailing to the 300 or 500 people that are likely to vote and say, I'm coming to the town, do you want to come meet me at this house? That's a real advantage over many, many months. And luckily, I've also worked with hundreds, if not thousands of people across the state on GMO labeling, raising the minimum wage, marriage equality, affordable housing, a number of other issues. And so luckily, I think I've got a lot of grassroots support and people are familiar with who I am, so I'm going to overcome this hurdle. But it is a little bit like Bernie's situation. I'm calling it sort of Bernie 2.0, where the Democratic Party on the national level certainly had their thumb on the scale against Bernie. And I think Vermonters are very frustrated with that and think the process should be fair. And now we're seeing that at the state level as well.
And and I just think that I don't understand why they have to have a problem with it. I mean, it's just, and why is it taking so long? Like you said, I mean, it's going to be now. If you get it in 2 weeks, then it's not going to be much use to you.
I mean, we have to plan a campaign weeks in advance, and certainly you make adjustments on the fly for events of the day. But in terms of planning events, planning your voter outreach, planning your strategy, a lot of the next 3 or 4 weeks are pretty well laid out, because the primary is over in 5 weeks. So folks can go to their town clerk now and vote. Folks can call for absentee ballots now and vote. And so getting information out to them on a daily basis is really important. And so would I like it in a few weeks? Well, probably, although it's also interesting, every candidate is supposed to give the Democratic Party $7,000 or $8,000 to have access to that list. Well, if one candidate bought it in January and spent $8,000 for it, and I have to spend $8,000 to have it for 3 weeks, that's not a particularly fair situation either.
not at all. Well, you know, walking through life, you're only the second candidate that's come so far.
Okay.
The first one being Phil Scott, and then now yourself. So you've
Sure.
got enough going on the other candidates that
You
haven't
know,
gotten here
we're
yet.
all working hard, and everyone's trying to get everywhere. But I appreciate that. Sure.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, because I've watched a detailed interview with you, I think it was on Interview, and you were talking about Bernie Sanders and the difference of progressive government and what that stands for. And I would love you to be able to go into it a little bit more so people understand what that means.
Well, I think fundamentally it means policymakers who are looking at the fundamental issues of economic justice and people earning a fair wage for a hard day's work, being able to have housing that's affordable, having universal health care, not healthcare system where either the for-profit industry or even the non-profit health insurance industry has people making obscene amounts of money, when really our money should be going towards how to give people good primary health care and secondary health care when they have issues, whether it be physical medical health issues, mental health issues, car accidents, bike accidents. We should have a system of care that everybody has equal access to. So to me, progressive values is those kinds of issues, but also it's about how does government work? Is government responsive to individuals? Is government and our government officials reaching out to the public on a regular basis and really encouraging everyday people to be a part of the process, not just lobbyists and special interests? And, you know, it's a process in Montpelier where luckily there are lobbyists and special interests on all sides of the political spectrum, and many voices are represented by people who are there. But it's always so much better if constituents talk to their representatives directly, talk to their senators directly, give them personal experience in an arena that maybe the legislator doesn't know as well. Where as legislators, we can know a little bit about a lot of things, but ultimately, none of us are experts at everything. And we have constituents who are. We have constituents who are teachers. We have constituents who are excavators and land working operators. We have foresters. We have farmers. We have doctors. We have lawyers, engineers, every kind of person out there, janitors, nurses. So those folks should always feel welcome into the system, especially when there's legislation being talked about their profession,
Right.
and say, you know, this is how it really is out there in the real world. And, you know, encourage more people to get involved.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you're saying people, anybody should feel comfortable about calling you or calling any of the other government officials to bring up anything that they are concerned about.
Absolutely.
And that's where you get what you're going to bring up. It's actually from the people that actually speak about it.
Well, certainly, and we're fortunate that in Vermont, we each represent a relatively small district. Chittenden County Senate happens to be the biggest. It's about 140,000 people. But most of the House districts are just 4,000 to 5,000 people. And so people do feel relatively comfortable approaching their representative and senator, but not everybody does. I think folks who are empowered in society typically feel more comfortable reaching out with a, quote, cold call. Hi, Senator Zuckerman. Hi, Representative, Jagar, whomever it might be. A lot of hardworking people who are working 60 hours a week to make ends meet, who maybe don't have as much education, who might be struggling to pay their bills, often are not empowered to call their legislator and have their voice be heard. And that's why I think the political world often skews policy towards folks who are wealthier, folks who are better off, folks who have that empowered voice. And so my goal would be to bring more everyday people into the process.
I think that's important, and of course, I've always stressed that on walking through life is to, speak what you really want people to know about you, and if that means calling up your Senate legislator and say, hey, this concerns me, or I've been through this, so this is why I know this experience. And not only that, but I think when I spent some time down in Montpelier in the State House, it was very inviting to me. And I really enjoyed my time down there.
Well, we're very fortunate. We have a very inviting State House.
Yes.
Folks may not realize there's no metal detectors going in. And after 9/11, some folks said, well, we better put up metal detectors and all these, impediments to entry. And, it is, as Speaker Michael Obahowski, who is from just south of here, back when I first got to the legislature, he would always call it the People's House. And that's what it is. And we want to make that building as welcoming as possible. So I'm really glad that your experience was one where you felt welcome and where you felt like you could express yourself.
Yes, and I actually spoke in front of one of the committees about my journey through recovery through the recovery center. So I was able to share my story of strength and how I was able to change my life, and it felt good to make a difference just by being able to share a recovery story. Because I don't think the state hears many of them or enough of them.
We've heard more in the last few years now that we're talking very honestly about the challenges of many types of addiction, but but it's not always in everybody's forefront. And so having people come in, tell their stories about either themselves or a friend who may have overdosed and died, or a relative, or so many of the challenges that come with addiction.
Yeah. And it's not just addiction. I think people, they have like Vermont Psychiatric, HRS and all that, who is encouraging people with mental illness to be able to use their voice. And that's something I think has been really scary for us. And I think by approaching it on this show that I have found that more people have wanted to come forward and talk about it. Because their idea is not only, okay, we've got this label, but see, I know what works for me for this, and I've got the same label as you. Maybe if I share what's worked for me, it may help you, even though it may not, but at least we're talking about it.
Well, and as more people speak about their experiences, fewer people feel isolated that they're alone.
Exactly, yes.
And that's true of so many different stigmas in our society.
Yes.
And it's very hard when you have an issue or a circumstance or a physical characteristic that is stigmatized in society to speak out. But when folks have the courage to do so, I think it often brings great relief to get it off of one's own chest and being held in. But also, all of a sudden, when one speaks out, you hear from so many others, oh, me too.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, it's not just you. And you start to build a community and realize, I'm not alone.
Right.
And, being alone or feeling like one is alone is probably one of the most depression and anxiety causing scenarios. And so anybody speaking out not only helps themselves, but I think they also help others realize they're not alone.
It's a great way to fight stigma, because maybe there's somebody that does have a stigma looking at that, but then they hear a story and it kind of like clicks, and it's kind of like, wow, they really overcame this, And I think it's an answer to bullying too, I think. There's a lot of people that are willing to listen, It's like doing this show. So CATV, when I first came here, I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen and how I was going to approach this, because I was very scared. Of course, and I had help. There was, the executive director first talked to me about it, and what do you think you want to put the subject matter around? And I told him. And so from there we built, and then they taught me how to edit. They taught me how to run a camera. And then I got involved in really wanting to know what CATV does and what it stands for, and it is specifically a way to use your voice and get heard. And they offer training in that, and they offer all of this. But so it can be empowering for anybody to go out and give this a try, even though it's kind of scary. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And they also offer like video contests,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, video contests, music contests, all of these little things, and video camp for the kids, which your kids love.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well, it's interesting. People are very used to being on the other side of the camera, watching the TV in their living room.
Yeah.
But once you've done it a few times, you realize, it's just like talking around the kitchen table with a friend. You sort of ignore the cameras that are over there, and it's really just about having a conversation.
Exactly, and I think the more encouragement we give people, the more they say, well, maybe you want to do something with this, and you know a lot about that. So it's kind of like, maybe I'll think about it. 3 weeks later, they'll come in and see somebody.
Right.
But I think that's what's important about community access television.
It's a very good resource.
Yeah. The other thing I think we want to talk about next, and this is going on along with the stigmas and everything that they have there, which is the marriage equality. And I myself I don't think it should be up to the government. I don't think it should be up to the people that hold stigmas or the bullies. I think it's a personal choice, and if somebody wants to, then they shouldn't. Nobody should be able to say a thing about it.
Well, certainly, I'm with you 100% on that. I mean, when the discussion came up in the late 1999 when the Supreme Court ruled in the Baker case that the state had to grant equal rights to all people in the state, regardless of their sexual orientation. I was there. I was in the House. I was the only candidate in this race who was serving at the time, and very immediately worked hard to get us towards full marriage equality. And it was a very tumultuous time for the state. There had been tremendous work done by Susan Murray, Beth Robinson, and many, many, many other people running around the state, talking to people in their communities, trying to make more people aware of the fact that just about everybody knew gay and lesbian friends, relatives, and whatnot, and sometimes they didn't know they knew, right. But that this was who we were talking about. And while we didn't get full marriage equality in 2000, 22 of us did vote for marriage equality as an amendment. With civil unions, we achieved many of the rights and responsibilities and legal protections. And then I actually continued to sponsor marriage equality legislation through all of the 2000s as the lead sponsor for most of those years until we did fortunately pass marriage equality in 2009. And that was a real honor, both during all those terms, working with the marriage equality community, putting in a bill every year so there was a bill to organize around and keep talking throughout the state, but also myself speaking to groups around the state about why it was important. And then ultimately we had to override Governor Douglas's veto. And it was 100 votes to do so, or maybe it was 99, and I was that last vote. Happenstance, because my name is Zuckerman, Z-U, I'm at the end of the alphabet. But it's a real honor to have been that last vote. And in part because of my many years of advocacy, I've actually earned the endorsement of Stan Baker and Peter Harrington, Baker of the Baker case, Stacy Jolles and Nina Beck, who are also another couple of plaintiff in the case, Susan Murray, who was one of the lead lawyers with Beth Robinson, who's now a Supreme Court justice, so I've not asked her for an endorsement. It would be inappropriate as a justice to get involved in political campaigns. But Sherry Corbin and Cheryl Rupe Adams, who are organizers for Freedom to Marry, have all endorsed my campaign. And that's because they've recognized my passion and commitment to equality, and equality within the gay and lesbian and bisexual transgender community, as well as equality across the board for all of the citizens of our state.
I just think that's important, and I really do think that it's time that people stopped, being mean. I've witnessed it. I tell you, I just sit there and cry because how can people be so mean?
Well, I think Bernie really captures it and has this last year in particular with his nationwide race for president. But he's always talked about coming together and working together to solve our problems. And sometimes there are very real economic struggles that people are facing. And when you're struggling to make ends meet, when you're struggling to put food on the table for your children, when you're struggling to keep a safe roof over your head, it's pretty easy to start to get angry at other people who are either taking advantage of the economic system and doing better, or are taking advantage of yourself or people like you if you're struggling and you feel like someone else is taking advantage of you. And it's sort of sadly in human nature a little bit to get your ups from someone else's downs. And so we have this constant battle where this person is beating up on this person and stigmatizing, who's then doing it to this person, who's then doing it to this person. And really we should be reaching out and working to pull everybody up to the top and making sure everybody's got those basic needs, and that we're not really competing with each other as everyday ordinary citizens. Right. We're competing with a handful of people who are concentrating all the wealth and all the opportunity and all the sort of scenarios where as a society we're all working to make our society a great society. Whether it's a janitor cleaning the offices on the third shift so that the people that come in the next day come into a clean office and a good work environment, well, they're important too. Or the nurse that works the third shift overnight, making sure all the vital statistics are good and making sure folks are comfortable in the hospital. Or anybody who's working any shift is a part of our society, and we're all contributing to make it the great state that we have. And so we should all be working together to make sure everyone's got their basic needs met.
That's something that we might talk a little bit about too, if it's okay, is
anything
people that are like on Social Security, disability, or SSI, or welfare, or whatever. I found them to be some of the most helpful people as far as, you need somebody to listen to, you need somebody to talk to, at my place, okay, because most of us are on food stamps. So the middle of the month, we start we're going to put on the barbecue. You bring your own meat, and then I'll make the salads. And then the next time you make the salads, and however it is.
Right.
But it's like a gathering of people that can help each other out.
Yep.
And it's neat, and it's neat to see that they can we can all do this all together. And there's so much out there for us now. That's another thing I wanted to say. I mean, I don't know if you know much about White River Junction, but this is one of the kindest towns that communities, because Hartford has got 5 towns.
Yeah.
But if I can explain some of the kind things that have been done here, there's like just, when you walk down the street, everybody smiles at you. I don't care who it is and what they do or anything.
Absolutely.
But they smile at you.
Yep.
They got the Hartford Garden Friends, but they go out and they make the place so beautiful with flowers and all of that. They got the Transformational Center down in the park down there, where they grow trees and vegetables and everybody can share. Yeah.
Well, I would say certainly that's a spirit that I think is strong throughout Vermont.
Yes.
We look at the recovery from Hurricane Irene and people coming together to help each other. On occasion when I travel, go back to Boston where my sister lives, or down to Virginia where my mom lives, and you go through cities sometimes that you don't see that friendliness. You walk down the street with a lot of people and you're smiling at them, and they think you're a little off kilter if you're smiling at them. It's a little weird.
Yeah.
And, I'm very, very pleased and proud to be living in Vermont, where we smile at each other.
Yeah.
And we acknowledge each other.
Yeah.
And there's a real community spirit that comes through with that. And part of our farm, we do the same thing with donations to the food shelf, or when there were some workers on strike with, at that time, Fairpoint, we donated food to them. It was around Thanksgiving, so they could have a Thanksgiving meal,
Right.
and they weren't, sort of suffering with their family around Thanksgiving, which is one of my favorite holidays, because it's
Right.
not about gifts and presents and consumption. It's about breaking bread and food with your family, and acknowledging the importance of our community and food. And so, I think we're very fortunate to live in a community like, Hartford and White River Junction, as you speak of, and really throughout the state, where people do care for each other and take care of each other. There's a storybook I remember I used to read to my daughter. She's 10 now, so it's a little younger story than she would read now. But it was about a mouse with other mice who were all collecting food for the winter.
Yep.
And this one mouse was just kind of wandering along and looking at the clouds, or looking at the birds, or doing other things. And the other mice were like, "Come on, we got to store up food, collect seeds, collect food." And deep in the winter, as they were eating down through their larder and they didn't have as much food left, he started to tell stories of the clouds he had seen, and the birds he had heard and seen, and the colors and the different events that had been happening all summer and fall. And by telling the stories, he took their minds off of their hungry bellies. And then spring came and there was new food again. And so, we all contribute in different ways, is sort of the moral of that story. And it's not always about everybody being in that productive member of society making widgets factor. There are other people who contribute through art, through music, through farming, and we all are enriched by the diversity of ways that we contribute in our community.
Right, and that's so important, is to find what it is, what your purpose is in life, and be able to do it.
We're not robots.
It is. Yeah, it's like, I've got a neighbor that her thing is everybody calls her grandma because she's the neighborhood grandma, and that's her thing. And the other thing I want to talk a little bit about too, as far as food source goes, I mean, Hartford's just started a wonderful thing where they're going out and they're passing out lunches on the streets, which is the most wonderful thing. I've never seen anybody do that. And then also, we've got like the Haven, which does food shelves. We've got Willing Hands that brings fresh vegetables and fruits to the different places that service people. We've got Farmers Market, as we talked.
Sure.
And I believe with all of that, plus the help of being able to use your food stamp card at a farmer's market, this is going to be, wait a minute, this is going to be my first experience, because I didn't know about it before. But this Thursday, I'm going to go to my first farmer's market. I'm so excited, because now my diet has changed. I have to be on a diabetic diet.
Okay.
When you first hear that, it's kind of like, how am I going to be able to do
drops.
that?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, how am I going to do that, Yeah. So,
Well, absolutely. At our farm stand in the Burlington Farmers Market, we've accepted what's called farm-to-family coupons for a long time that folks on women, infants, and children WIC program, as well as some other state food support programs have given out. And along with those, now there's crop cash, which I think is what you're talking about with EBT swipe, where you actually get 2 for 1.
Yeah.
But those crop cash dollars can only be used to buy vegetables and fruits and local farm products from the market. And it's a great sort of win-win. We're always looking for those sorts of things where folks on food stamps get encouraged to buy more local and healthy food, which is always good nutritionally for people. And it also increases sales for farms and farm stands and farmers markets. And that's certainly a positive because not all farms are making very much money.
Right.
And it gives folks an opportunity to have more market consumers to buy their product. And because you're getting 2 for 1, you get to feel like your dollars are going to get you the same amount, if not more food, by buying locally and fresh.
Yeah.
And the farmer is also getting remuneration in a fair way for the work they're doing.
right. I think that's important. I think it's important that they were all aware of this. And I know it's part of an education thing because, I didn't know anything about this before. I didn't know. My doctor spoke about it and, with my concern of not having enough money to be able to buy fruits and vegetables.
Right.
And then hearing from him some ideas and then going to these local organizations and finding out, we can help, It's great to hear that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to move on to, if we could, a little bit, is livable wages.
Sure. So I've been fighting for increases to the minimum wage in all of my time in the legislature, and I've gone through 2 minimum wage increase pieces of legislation while serving. First was under Gay Symington when she was Speaker and I was Chair of Agriculture under her leadership. And I was fighting for increases to the minimum wage, and we increased it a couple times, and then with designated times that it would go up, and then we indexed it to inflation so that it would at least always go up a little bit every year. Unfortunately, we still had pegged the initial start at a rate well below a livable wage or a wage that people could afford their basic needs. And then obviously in the last couple of years, it's been brought up again, and we removed the indexing and created a 4-year step increase that was very clear and is more than the rate of inflation, so we can start to make up some of the lost ground from the 60s and 70s when the minimum wage was started. And many of us would like to see us increase the minimum wage with clear stepped increases to get to $15 an hour, by 2020 or so.
Yeah.
So that if we do it, give or take $1 a year, maybe a little more, then the businesses like my own, which pays people often a minimum wage or low wages, unfortunately, can sell more product each year at a better price because more people will have money. If we raise it by $1, then there's people with more money to spend,
Right.
and they're going to buy more local food, or they're going to buy more local clothing, or they're going to shop more locally, and they're going to spend that money. Low-income people, when they get more money, don't sit there and send it off to Wall Street to invest it. They spend it. And so if my business can sell some more stuff at a better price for the business, because we've also then are paying our people better wages, then those 2 things can go up hand in hand if we have good prediction on when that's going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that brings me to another question, and this is specifically about healthcare. So healthcare, I know that the state of Vermont's had, since Irene, has had a problem with funding the mental health system. Yep. For one thing, I mean, the hospital was destroyed, obviously.
Right.
And I'm looking to questioning about holistic approaches. I was fortunate enough in California to be in a holistic hospital, which is, services mind, body, and spirit, which I think is very important.
Right.
And also the medical profession, it seems to be able to see a benefit to that. So at some point, somewhere down the road, I would like to see that maybe brought up.
Well, absolutely.
In the Senate as something that could possibly be a tool.
Well, I was fortunate when I was growing up, my high school had a program class called Body-Mind Research.
Yeah, there you go.
And it was very much discussing the connection of our mental state of affairs and our physical state of affairs. And when you look at another piece of that, which I'm obviously involved with in my private business side, which is my farm, looking at growing food. It's an organic farm, trying to build the soil healthier. That leads to healthier plants, which can fend off pests better, et cetera. But if people are eating healthy food and they're in a better state of mind because of a community that supports individuals, regardless of various stigmas and so forth that we should get rid of, then I think we'll physically be much healthier as well. And so healthy food, healthy mind, healthy body are all hand in hand together. And when we look at our healthcare system, we are very much a symptom-solving society.
Yeah.
We don't really go to the root cause of many of the challenges that we face. So we think, well, if you have a problem, we'll solve it with a pill.
Yeah.
And that pill will take care of the symptom, sometimes the underlying problem. But really, we need to be looking deeper and going, why is this happening to you? What's causing this? Is it a physical ailment, or is it circumstantial in your life causing you these challenges? And we need to continue to expand and look more holistically at our healthcare system and look at, there's many of these things that can save money. Physical therapists who work with your knee to realign your knee over time to put it in the right position to deal with a knee problem is much less expensive than surgery.
Right.
And so there are a lot of circumstances and a lot of illnesses where we could address them far better if we had better primary care and more easily accessible primary care, so people would go right in when they have a small issue before it becomes a big issue.
Right.
And also if those primary care physicians had more alternative ways of thinking about how to heal or solve some of those challenges, rather than, oh, this is your problem, this is the course, this is what we do, and we'll have surgery in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And as you were talking about circumstances and things that could aggravate a symptom, especially of mental illness or whatever, one of the things that I found most helpful was not only talk therapy, but also learning how to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something.
I could use that a little bit.
Yeah, well, with an anxiety problem, it's hard to do, but the more you practice, the more you're able to do. The more you're able to find solutions when you meditate to your own problems, I think.
Right.
Or this is what worked for me. And then even go one step forward and say, hey, I need help.
Right.
Instead of just sitting there expecting, nobody's going to understand, nobody's going to understand. Instead, raise my hand and say, well, I need help. I need help today. I need help.
Right.
I need help. And then you're benefiting the other person by giving them the ability to be able to help. And if you can see that,
Well, I think
it's
we all, the joy we get from gift giving or good energy giving, giving help, in Vermont we do. We have a great community, and I think we all experience that, and many experience it as children, seeing their parents being community-minded individuals. And when you see and experience the joy that you get from making someone else's day better, it feeds itself. And you want to do it more and more often. Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
It makes you feel good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the greatest messages that I have gotten, and this is why spirituality has become so important to me. Mm-hmm. And the next thing we wanted to talk about is education, your feelings on education, because I know you were on the education committee.
Right. Well, I was fortunate to grow up in a very good public education system. I am a firm believer that we should have a solid, strong public education system because it fundamentally affords access to every child to a better future. Mm-hmm. And, Act 60 and 68 really moved us in that direction where towns with lower property values were going to have a harder time raising revenues for their schools. We all end up equally being able to raise money for our schools. And that's very important because, if you are in certain economic circumstances, sometimes you don't have as much support for your educational circumstances, or you don't have as much opportunity for educational opportunities as in a private school setting. And to me, we've got to make sure our public schools create opportunities for everybody and really look at the individual child's strength, interests, and certainly we want them to come out well-rounded and with critical thinking skills, but also to really reinforce and build on someone's strengths so that they can go in the direction that they're most suited to go to be productive. Because if they are productive as a teacher, as a social worker, as a widget maker, as an engineer, then they're going to feel good about what they're doing. And back to what we were just talking about, if you're feeling good about what you're doing, you're going to be much more positive in your day-to-day life. Right. You're going to drive more calmly. You're going to treat people with a bigger smile as you go down the street. And so to me, our education system is our foundation of a just and fair society.
I think, well, I agree with you there too. And talking a little bit about Voc Rehab, I also not only want to speak about Voc Rehab, but I also want to speak about the Governor's Committee for Employing People with Disabilities and the Ticket to Work program, which has been very effective from what I understand.
Okay.
And both of them actually offer training in various things that you may like to get to know how to do or try, you know. And I think support for vocational workers or like in the mental health department, caseworkers that actually can help you with things that you may not understand as far as filling out paperwork or budgeting your money or whatever. It's just so important. So support for me for mental health workers that way, for vocational rehabilitation workers that way, I think is so important for us here in Vermont. And from what I understand, there was a 2% raise in the mental health department, speaking to the commissioner, which I'm really encouraged us, considering
this year
everything.
Pretty good.
Yeah, considering everything that's happened with Irene and things like that, you know. So I think we're moving forward, and it's nice to be able to share it with you because you can hear my thoughts on that, and I think you're a really good listener.
Yeah.
You understand some of the things that I'm talking about. So.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I'm not an expert in every field, but I've had a number of different people with who have either ongoing mental health challenges or sometimes acute, where they've been able to work it out through therapy and or medication or various things. And you know, each person has a different story to tell, and a different experience that they've lived, and you know, making sure that folks have the resources and the tools to find a place to fit into society is very, very important. And you know, we've obviously seen that in our law enforcement or criminal justice system, when you look at the disproportionate number of folks, either people of color or people with mental health issues, we know we've got a problem in how our society addresses these issues, because there is not a need to incarcerate more people with mental health issues. There is not a need to incarcerate more people of color, which is very disproportionate to our population. And so we really need to look at what is causing us to do that. What stigmas do we have? What support systems do we not have in place early on in life where we can steer someone down a more productive path? And so, you know, it's really thinking in a long-term vision. You know, as a farmer, one can go day to day, but really, you know, you plant many crops thinking about how you're going to operate your farm to make sure you yield those crops 60, 100, 200 days out. And, you know, I think as policymakers, sometimes we think very short term because we're on these 2-year electoral cycles, when really what we need to be doing is thinking, where do we want this state to be in 25 years and 50 years? And what policy changes can we make today that may take a little while to have a real impact, but that real impact will be much more grounded and solid, and will build a foundation for a positive future for our state. And so while I've had my name on some big legislation over the last couple decades, I never expected or thought that I would still be involved politically to see them through to fruition. But I planted the seed of those ideas, and I've tried to nurture those so that those issues would build in momentum. And that includes marriage equality, as we talked about earlier. That includes GMO labeling, which when I left,
we didn't get to talk about
when
that.
I left the house after 12 years or 14 years, you know, we hadn't passed GMO labeling, but I had been talking about genetic engineering in our food for a long time in the building, while incredibly active people throughout the state had been talking about it. And the momentum continued to build after I had left. And I was very proud of that, because it meant it wasn't me necessarily individually that was making that happen. I was part of a community that was moving that issue forward. And I was fortunate to get back into the Senate when we did finish the job. But, you know, to me, introducing ideas, introducing where do we want to be in 20, 30, 50 years is a really important conversation to have at the same time as we deal with people's challenges today. Livable wages, affordable housing, clean, safe food and water, universal health care. And it's really doing both of those things that's critical. Immediate term issues, and how do we shape the future so that some of these immediate issues become more tempered and not as severe in the future.
That's, you kind of have to build at it, you know. And so it's like I said, when they said 2% raise, I was like ecstatic and thrilled, and you know, it's in the right direction. You're going in the right direction.
That's right.
And that's what we need to do. And I feel very comfortable talking to anybody in the Montpelier area, or a lot of it I do on phones and stuff like that. So it's
Right.
very important.
Yeah.
But I'm also concerned a little bit about homeless veterans. I didn't know if maybe you knew anything about that. Was there a process of affordable housing for them? Or?
Well, I'm again not an expert in everything, but clearly, folks who put their lives on the line for us and our freedoms and our security should not be left out on the street homeless. That just seems to me to be criminal. I certainly have a plan for more affordable housing in Vermont to try and invest in either Vermont home clusters. They're a trailer that's built, it's like a trailer, but much more energy efficient. They're net zero. They're built on a real foundation, and they last much longer so that people who are working low-wage jobs can actually build equity with a mortgage, as opposed to trailers, which have almost no value after a few years. And so there's no ability to build equity as a low-income individual. But if we were to put in more Vermont homes in clusters that were on transportation routes so people could get to and from work more easily, and build more affordable housing so that our veterans would have a place to live, along with the Veterans Hospital down south, the Veterans Hospital here, the Veterans Home down south in Bennington, it's critically important that we treat the individuals who have put their lives on the line for us with the respect and dignity that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? We're at the. I told you.
That's fine.
Okay, just so I can explain a little bit to the people walking through life. I differ on legalizing marijuana, and I'm going to tell you why. And I think I've shared this before. So, if you look at this as a story of Linda and Ted, that's me and my husband. Okay, so we're not taking everybody. We're taking one specific story.
Every example counts.
Right, exactly, because there are a lot of others like myself. So, anytime that Ted and I had smoked marijuana, we ended up in the state hospital for probably a period of 2 months at a time. And it had long-term effects. So this is one of my concerns. The other concern is Ted and I both have addiction issues. So we're both alcoholics. So when I think about that, and I think about other people, and I think about, alcohol is legal, right? It is legal. And look at the effects that we have with that now. And you're taking a drug like marijuana to make it illegal. And mixing the two is very dangerous. And I kind of like to think Colorado is an example, using an example stating, and a lot of people state that the state would profit. But as somebody that has addiction issues, what I look at is the drug dealer is going to know you're going to be selling for a certain amount. They're going to make a better quality, and they're going to sell it cheaper. So really making money isn't one thing. And the other thing is that marijuana affects people's, I don't think it's memory, but it's lack of enthusiasm. So for children, for people that can't find enough oomph to get up out of bed anyway.
Right. Well, those are reasonable and fair concerns, and certainly fair concerns given some of the information people have heard over the last 80 years about cannabis, as well as personal experiences. But for me, I look at it as an issue where we currently have cannabis fully available today, anywhere and everywhere. And I think we have to wrap up soon.
Yeah.
But having it illegal, people are buying it from drug dealers, not from a regulated marketplace. You don't know how strong it is, whereas beer, the rates of alcohol in different beers and wine and so forth. And, our alcohol problems do exist, but we had far more crime around alcohol and the Al Capone era when alcohol was illegal. And with respect to Colorado, they actually just came out with state information that teen use of not only cannabis but other drugs has actually gone down since they made it legal. I suspect at first we would have a little bit of a bump because, hey, it's legal, great. But then ultimately we would have resources for education and prevention and treatment. We have people who are opiate addicts with a 1-year waiting list in Burlington. If we had the resources from cannabis to help people who, the day they come in and say, I have a drug problem, I want help, instead of saying, oh, let's take your name, we'll get back to you in 6 months. Well, sometimes that person isn't going to come back. They're not going to come back because they may be dead. They're not going to come back because they hit a spot where they were ready to ask for help, and as a state, we didn't give it to them. Are they going to come back again? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And from a resources perspective, Colorado actually has raised over $100 million a year for their education capital. And in fact, the drug dealers, there's no longer cannabis coming from Mexico into Colorado. Right. If anything, it's actually going the other direction because the quality in the regulated legal system is actually better than that which was not legal. So I think a lot of those issues are being proven not quite to be as big an issue as some folks feared it would be. And you know, there's no doubt that there's a percentage of society where smoking cannabis triggers psychological effects that, in your case and your husband, I think you said Ted, and others, can be very, very detrimental. Well, we should certainly have resources available both to help in that circumstance and to say, okay, for those who have addiction challenges, whether it's alcohol or other, let's have the resources there to help people not get into these drugs in the first place. And have support systems and education programs and information that is much more readily available versus the stigma of someone who does maybe smoke cannabis and is looking for help, but there's a stigma, oh, you're a druggie. Well, we talked about stigmas earlier. You're never going to seek help if there's a stigma about it. Whereas if in the store it says, if you smoke this frequently or you have these kinds of reactions, please seek help. Here's an 800 number. It's accepted that there's folks for whom it's a challenge. Let's help those people. And then the other 95% of the population who today is occasionally smoking, but they're illegal and they're criminals for doing so. Not always now because we've decriminalized small amounts. But why not remove that stigma and actually regulate the quality, regulate the access, probably bring skier visits and other tourism to the state. We have tourism around alcohol, these great microbrews. We're all very proud of Heady Topper and The Alchemist and all these, you know, Vermont brews, Long Trail, et cetera. And we have folks come here, stay overnight, spend money, get driven around the state, and they leave. Well, that's tourism. That's Vermont's economy. Why wouldn't we want to boost that as well?
Well, the only reaction I want to say to that, if I can, please, is you're talking about making revenue and you're talking about education. But what about the rehabilitation centers?
Absolutely.
What about the like Valley Vista, the places where people would go to get help?
Let's fund those completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers from Colorado are showing that there are ample resources for education, prevention, treatment facilities, law enforcement around driving. After all those are spent, and we make sure to do that first, that's of course the first priority. And we could not only do it for cannabis, but help with the opiate challenges that we have.
And that's bad, opiates.
So we put money into those things from this resource. Then it's the remaining extra resources that go towards the economic development or the building broadband out or other things that we could do to help empower people. Because a lot of folks also turn to drugs or alcohol when, again, we were talking about empowerment earlier, when they don't have any hope. And so we need to expand our economy, and we're not necessarily just with pot growers. We need to expand our economy of the skiing industry, broadband industry, so people can do tech work from their home in rural communities. Those are the things that are going to help people get off of the depression train that leads sometimes to overuse of various drugs in our society. So.
Well, that's the last thing. We're talking about the opiate addiction. What do you think about the heroin use in Vermont? Not just heroin, but now it's not just heroin, it's bath salts.
Fentanyl, meth, all that.
Yeah, all the meth.
Well, it's a huge challenge, and it's not just a Vermont challenge. Certainly Governor Shumlin brought it up, and I'm glad he did. But most rural states, and now even urban states, are seeing these drug problems. And so much of it, I think, comes from sort of economic disparity and economic lack of hope. And, you know, folks sort of feel like they have no future, and so they just go out and have fun. And by having fun, they try some things that, unfortunately, maybe they shouldn't try, and become addicted. And then that turns one into a criminal because you're stealing to feed an addiction and a habit that's really got you gripped. And, you know, it's got to be a holistic approach to solving these problems.
Holistic approach, yes.
Both from support services, but also economic development, where people have hope to be able to live in a clean, safe, and affordable home, where people have access to health care, where people have access to basic wage jobs that actually pay a basic wage that affords you a basic standard of living that you can live in dignity and safety.
So wrap up a little bit about that. I would say, so you're in support of this for more recovery centers,
Absolutely.
like Turner Points, for more rehab hospitals?
The first place that the resources from cannabis reform should go to is prevention, education, treatment. I mean, those are the top three, and there's no doubt about it. And the projected economic circumstances are such that we would have ample resources for that, so we could make robust systems with both people there as social workers and mental health therapists and others who can help people, as well as residential treatment facilities as well. No doubt about it.
Well, I'm encouraged to finally hear somebody say they agree with holistic. I hear that's exciting.
Well, we have to think more holistically, both in drug issues as well as economic justice issues, as well as how we treat our planet. And we're needing to shift some of our priorities. That's for sure.
Well, I hope I didn't put you through too much, because I definitely want you to come back to talk
It's been
more
a
about
pleasure.
some of these issues, and maybe meet some more people around here.
Well,
I think it'd be great.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure, and it's been a real joy going around the state while running for lieutenant governor, and in the time that I have while also running my farm and trying to run a small business with a family. But to continue to meet folks like yourself and have these kinds of discussions and really share both my vision of where Vermont can be in 2 years, 25 years, and 50 years, and also learn and hear from people who all should become more engaged in the process. And as lieutenant governor, I would certainly work to bring far more people into the process and really engage folks in how to make change in the political system that will affect people positively on their day-to-day level. And so the opportunity to be here is a great honor, and I appreciate your having me on your show today.
Well, good. I didn't pick on you too much then, right?
No, and if people want more information, they can just go to my website.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Sure, Zuckerman4VT.com.
Could you maybe give the audience out there
Sure,
a
it's
message?
www.zuckerman4VT.com, and that's F-O-R when you spell out the word for. I'm a farmer. I've been a legislator for 18 years. I've led the way on a number of issues. I grew up in my house with a poster on the wall that said, "Behold the turtle who only makes progress when it sticks its neck out." And I've just always stuck my neck out on issues around economic justice, social justice, environmental justice, sustainable agriculture. And I'd really like to see the opportunities that the Lieutenant Governor's office has to continue to promote good issues for our economic future here in Vermont, and bringing people into the political process. I'm the only candidate in the race who's been endorsed by Bernie ever, and I've been endorsed by him 10 times for all of my House and Senate races. And if you want to see the Bernie revolution come alive and well here in Vermont, then I hope you'd support me here in Vermont, so we can really make the change here in Vermont that we all want to see in our country with Bernie and his bid for president, and the incredible way that he inspired people. Positive message, bringing us together to solve our problems, not dividing us by stereotypes and stigmas. We've got to work together to make a better future.
Yeah. And I'd like to say to the audience out there that it is coming around primary time, which is August 8th.
It's now.
Oh, but wait. Yeah.
You can get
now
your ballots
you can,
now.
Yeah.
You can vote at your clerk. You can get them to mail you one.
Yeah.
But it ends on August 9th.
Well, that's when it ends. That's where if you're going to go to the polls.
You missed it
if
you don't do it. Yeah.
So get on the phone, call your town clerk, and decide which way you want to go with getting it mailed in, walk in and get one, or don't wait until August 9th. That's, you can go.
You never know what's going to happen on election day. You might get in a car accident, hopefully not, or you might win the lottery and travel to Florida and Disney World.
Know.
If you vote early, you know you voted.
And I especially want to talk to the audience members that I care a lot about, and I know that we've struggled through some hard times right now, and it's kind of hard to make our presence known. But if you do pick up the phone, call your town clerk, this is something that you can do in your own living room and make your informed decisions there and get to know each one of the candidates. Find somebody that you really care about and you really think you would like to see in the office, no matter who it is, and vote. That's what I'd like to say.
There you go.
So
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here, and
Absolutely.
I hope you come back soon. It's great having you here on Walking Through Life.
Absolutely.
So anyway, this is Linda Carver. Now we're saying goodbye for today, but we'll see you next time on Walking Through Life.
Walking through this life of mine, well, it's teaching me so many things, like how to love and how to lose, and how to